Hey guys, I'm Declan, and today in Ethical Fashion there's a couple of things worth talking about. So we're going to look at an article I saw in The Guardian this morning talking about the difference between organic and sustainable and how the two get confused. And then we're going to look at the report that was issued to the government, talking about it's called Fixing Fashion, Clothing Consumption and Sustainability. It's the name, title of the report. But we'll start with the Guardian article. It's talking about organic and sustainable and greenwashing, and how to avoid greenwashing. So you know whether it's actually ethical or just looks ethical. So we'll start with organic, and the benefit with the word term organic is that it is a legal defined term. So if something says organic, it is organic. Like, it just means that it never had any toxic chemicals or unnatural methods of processing. So it's a pretty obvious one. That is a good one to look out for. But sustainability is basically just a word that's very vague, doesn't have any legal words, and it's kind of interpretable as to what sustainable can mean. And it's covered, like, the organic is the product, but the sustainable can cover like a whole range of things, from how it was produced to how it was shipped, how it was sold. Even like people can use the term sustainability for whether it's profitable or not. So this article is basically pointing out the importance of like certificates, like fair trade, organic certificates from different regions and different trustworthy sources, and don't just trust something because it says sustainable or ethical or eco-friendly. Like, none of them words really mean anything, because they mean different things to different people, so companies can use them quite easily for marketing purposes. The article's definition of sustainability is that it should benefit the communities, should be energy efficient, should reduce waste, and have fair working conditions, which sounds pretty good. But the only way to know that is like with certification, really, especially around terms such as sustainability. So you need to find a certificate that you agree with or that ticks the boxes that you're into. So like looking at fair trade, which looks at the farmers and how whether they get paid fairly for the crop and stuff. This article is actually sort of kind of from perspective of coffee beans, even though it does mention like the fashion industry and stuff. And obviously they're all it's fair trade is from a farming perspective. And then like if you look at like GOTS, the Global Organic Textile Standard, that's ensuring that it's organic, but also the process of the production of the textile and manufacturing and dyes and stuff like that. So you've got to kind of look for certifications that you're into. Even bananas got fair trade logo. It's the same company that chooses fair trade for same standard for fashion or food. So it's worth looking at. When I was younger, I was always confused why bananas had because it's like one of the first things that had like the fair trade. It's one of the most common things that it's a fair trade sticker on. And I was always confused as to why there was a fair trade option. Like, you could choose whether it was fair trade or not. That never really made sense to me. I was like, so if that's the fair trade, what's the other one? Because I suppose when you don't realise that, like when you're younger, or just when not educated on this side of things, you think you assume that it's fair trade to begin with. You don't assume that you're not paying fairly. You assume that's just the cost of the product. So that was probably I was just thinking it's probably one of the first times I was considering like looking into that the existence of the fact that things weren't fair trade, that you had to choose whether to be fair or not. And I think like when you get that choice to like choose whether you want to pay, whether it was more ethical or fairer or the better choice, you tend to. It seems obvious to choose. It seems obvious to me at least to choose the fairer option when that is an option. Especially because it's not like the product that's not fair is any better. In fact it's normally worse product anyway. So it seems like an obvious choice. I think that's why people are trending that way, to try choose the most sustainable, most ethical option, whether that's organic or whatever. So that's why the problem is with greenwashing is it becomes like a marketing idea rather than a social idea. That's why it's worth looking out for the certificates that you can trust and like impartial, not so biased to the product. In terms of organic, I don't think it was so obvious that like, oh, that's got an organic sticker, so it must be better. Organic, I think probably partly the way it was marketed was that it was like a personal choice, like in terms of like, if I choose organic, it's going to be better for me. I'm not really thinking about the farmers or the suppliers at all, just thinking, I think organics, the way that it was marketed was definitely from my perspective, was more like, if I'm choosing organic, it's because it's better for me, or better for my health and stuff like that. It wasn't until past couple of years where with my own clothing brand that I was really then doing research into that I realised that the main reason for organic, especially in cotton and clothing, is actually for the farmers and the local communities at the production, throughout the production. It does obviously, is also better for the person as well. I think for me it's easier to make a choice. Like if it's just for me, then it doesn't matter, but if it becomes like about harming other people's lives, then it's kind of a more obvious choice that you should like pick organic. Organic then becomes more of a certificate, like the fair trade or fair wear or something like that. That's pointing out that it's going to be better for the supply chain and where it's coming from. It's going to be better for the environment as well. It's caused a lot of pollution, especially like locally to wherever it's been farmed. Like in conventional cotton, it leaks a lot of chemicals, toxic chemicals to wildlife and local communities and rivers and all kinds of things. So I think that becomes an easier choice than whether it's just better for your own health. So some of the main certifications that I look out for in my clothing, for my brand, for that I supply and for buying personally, is foundations like fair wear. Just look at the factories, make sure the workers are getting treated fairly, no forced labour, no slave labour, and fair wages. Another one that's like similar to that is the fair trade, which is at the farming level. Make sure the farmers get treated well and paid well, fairly. Also, as I've mentioned before, the global organic textile standard is a really good one for ensuring that it's organic throughout the whole process, no toxic chemicals, and also they keep an eye on the labour as well, make sure that's fair. There's also confidence in textiles, which is good for making sure that there's no harmful chemicals in the product, in the material. So they're probably the main ones that I look out for. That are quite popular, like quite big, well-known standards. So now I'm going to take a look at the report called Fixing Fashion, Clothing Consumption and Sustainability. So it's split into sections. The environmental cost, social costs, the textile waste, and some new economic models, some ideas, solutions. So I'll start with the environmental cost. Just going to read some key points. The way we make, use and throw away our clothes is unsustainable. Textile production contributes more to climate change than international aviation and shipping combined, consumes lake-sized volumes of fresh water and creates chemical and plastic pollution. Synthetic fibres, such as polyester, are being found in the deep sea, in the Arctic sea ice, in fish and shellfish. And it's got a picture of the Aral Sea, then and now, and it basically looks non-existent compared to what it used to be. The Aral Sea is pretty much, well, it has been drained by the use of irrigated cotton fields. It says the image here was taken from 2018, and the previous one, like the before, was 1960. So what's that, like 40, 50, less than 60 years? I think the fact that says the textile production contributes more to climate change than international flight and shipping combined is pretty crazy. When flight normally gets a lot of attention for using a lot of fuel and stuff. Next section is the social costs of our clothes. And this was like the most important thing to us when we started our brand. And it still is, and it's like basically what who's making your clothes. So it says here, our biggest retailers have chased the cheap needle around the planet, commissioning production in countries with low pay, little trade union representation, and weak environmental protection. In many countries, poverty pay and conditions are standard for garment workers, most of whom are women. It says they're also concerned about the use of child labour, prison labour, forced labour and bonded labour in factories and the garment supply chain. Fast fashion's overproduction and overconsumption of clothing is based on the globalisation of indifference towards these manual workers. So it's got its description on what this article considers fast fashion to be. It says fast fashion is a term used to describe a new accelerated fashion business model that has evolved since the 1980s. It involves increased numbers of new fashion collections every year, quick turnarounds and often low prices. Reacting rapidly to offer new products to meet consumer demand is crucial to this business model, which I think we can see in terms of collections and like seasons. Like the seasons basically decide whether it's coats or shorts, but the collections are now pretty much, well, it's quite common for to have like new collections out every week, which is insane really. It says two of the world's biggest cotton producing countries, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, use forced labour to pick cotton. Here it's also pointing out that quite shockingly, labour exploitation is also taking place in the UK. Made in the UK should mean workers are paid at least the minimum wage, but we were told it is an open secret that some garment factories in places like Leicester are not paying the minimum wage. This isn't like an official report. It says here that this must stop, but because the risks of being caught are so low, then the incentive to cut corners is high. The same fast fashion retailers sourcing from Leicester are also selling clothes so cheaply that they are being treated as single-use items, which leads on into the next section, which is the textile waste. This is just a summary of the report, it's not the full report. So going into the waste, and which is obviously a big problem in terms of pollution and sustainability, and this next section I thought was quite interesting. I was quite surprised. It says we buy more clothes per person in the UK than any other country in Europe. Which, like I knew fashion, obviously, fashion is a problem. I didn't realise that England was one of the biggest consumers, is the biggest consumer in Europe. Not necessarily per quantity, but per person. It says here, what can't be sold, what the brands can't sell, is torn up and turned into insulation and mattress stuffing, if lucky. Otherwise it ends up either incinerated or in landfill. All this just to say, this is complaint, this saying that this is just to save the brand, so that they can sell the next collection and not keep hold of all stock. Around 300,000 tonnes of textile waste ends up in household black bins every year. Less than 1% of material used to produce clothing is recycled into new clothing at the end of its life. It says here that fashion shouldn't cost the earth. Voluntary corporate social responsibility initiatives have failed significantly to improve pay and working conditions or reduce waste. The scientific warnings are stark on sustainability, overconsumption and climate change are driving mass extinction. So it's got some ideas on how to help solve these problems, what it wants the government to do, put in place. One of the main ones, the one that's getting the headline, is to tax fashion, to charge an extra penny per garment. Yeah, it says here a charge of 1 penny per garment on producers could raise 35 million to invest in better clothing collection and sorting in the UK. Personally, I'm not sure it's a good idea, because I'm not sure that it'll make much difference to the fashion industry. They'll probably charge just even more to the public, slightly more to the public, and just make more profits and take less responsibility. So I'm not sure it's the best idea. It's got some other ideas that I think worth considering. It says here, this one seems like a kind of obvious one to me that I think should be enforced, is we recommend that the government reforms taxation to reward fashion companies that design products with lower environmental impacts and penalise those that do not. Moving from conventional to organic cotton, from virgin polyester to recycled PET, would help to reduce the negative impact of clothing industry. The government should investigate whether its proposed tax on virgin plastics, which comes into force in 2022, should be applied to textile production that contains less than 50% recycled PET to stimulate the market for recycled fibres in the UK, which I think sounds like it should be fairly easy to propose. So because the tax is going to be there for virgin plastics anyway. Also points out that the government should change the system to end the throwaway society, as it's often more expensive to repair an item than to buy a new one, and many people lack the skill to perform more than basic clothing repairs. So it's suggesting, which also seems like a great idea, is suggesting incentives for retailers to repair garments, which would obviously help reduce waste. And the final notes, which probably seem to be aimed more at the consumer, is we're told that the most sustainable garment is the one that we already own, and that repairing, rewearing, reusing and renting are preferable to recycling and discarding clothes, which I think it's pretty true, and it's generally seems to be the most, the most sustainable suggestion out there at the moment, which is just to buy less, look after your clothes, buy better quality clothes that last longer, and learn how to repair basic damage. Some more suggestions that I think sound really positive is that it says the government should publish a publicly accessible list of the retailers required to release the Modern Slavery Act, so that the public will be able to see their reports on the Modern Slavery Act. It also suggests strengthening the Modern Slavery Act to require large companies to perform due diligence checks across their supply chain to ensure their materials and products are being produced without forced labour or child labour, which I think is probably overdue, really. A lot of companies just ignore the supply chain, don't even research whether it is included forced or child labour, which is, I think, it's just like a ignorance is bliss kind of situation. It's got some fairly like interesting points, just which might be enforced, I don't know. That that the government should be trying to collaborate with fashion retailers, water companies, and washing machine manufacturers to take a lead on solving the problem of microfiber pollution. It's interesting. I know that there's obviously been people working on solutions for the microfibers during the washing process. The loss of for microplastics. I think this was like a really strong point as well, which just seems crazy that it's like this, is that the government should ban incinerating or landfilling unsold stock that can be reused or recycled. Which obviously seems insane to burn perfectly good clothing. Suggests that that lessons on designing, creating, mending and repairing clothes be included in schools at Key Stage 2 and 3. I'm not sure that's necessary. That maybe, I think it should be an option, like in education, to when you go into, if you go into anything to do with clothing, fashion, obviously. But I don't think it should be mandatory for kids to be designing. I just don't think it would be enforced as a productive education to teach kids how to design, create and mend clothing. Is quite specific education. So I think the report being released is very positive. I think it's great, be very good for the industry. I think some of the things I've suggested is probably pushing it a little bit for what will actually happen, but maybe that's on purpose, just so that they settle sort of in the middle somewhere. I think some of the things like just really obviously should be in place. I think it's a great step forward, and then obviously some more reports being released this year, hopefully, and hopefully some things getting put in place. So that's the main topics that we've talked about, that have been talked about today. Yeah, fairly positive in the fashion industry steps taken, I would say. That's been Ethical Fashion today. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, see you tomorrow.